In this cycle 3, we're going to talk about CSS box shadow and transform. Throughout our session this cycle, we'll explore another CSS styling that will impact a great addition to make your website more visually appealing by adding shadows and transforming the layout to give emphasis to the elements. By the end of the session, you will have gained a deeper insight into CSS box shadow and transform and its broader implications by sharpening the saw. First, let us discuss what the CSS box shadow. So the CSS box shadow is a property used to apply one or more shadow to an element. So for example, you can apply this to a box model or to a button. The CSS property name we're going to use to apply this is box-shadow. Now, kindly fork the pen and let's try this and let's sharpen the saw. The first CSS box shadow styling is the solid shadow. So here in the value, we have first the horizontal shadow, the placement of the horizontal shadow. Next is the vertical shadow placement. And lastly is the color of your shadow. Let's try to style our solid shadow. So here in our CSS, we have the original styling for the box shadow. And then as you scroll down, we have here the styling with the hover effect. Let's add the box-shadow property. Next, let's set the value. First is the horizontal shadow value, for example, 15px. Next is the vertical shadow. And lastly is the color of your shadow. And as you hover the mouse over the box model, the solid shadow is changing. Second styling of the CSS box shadow is the blur effect shadow. The first value is the horizontal shadow, followed by the vertical shadow, and the third value is the blur shadow. So you can adjust the blur of your shadow. Next is the color of your shadow. So let's style the second box model with a blur shadow. Here in our CSS, scroll down. So in the hover effect, add the styling or the property box-shadow. Next is the value. First is the horizontal shadow, followed the vertical shadow, and the color of your shadow. Now as you can see, it is still solid, but if we apply the third value, we can set its blur effect. So you can set any value to set the blur shadow of your box model. The third styling of the box shadow is the spread radius of the shadow. So the first one is the horizontal shadow, second value is the vertical shadow, third is the blur shadow effect, and the fourth value is the radius of your shadow around your box model, and then followed by the color of your shadow. Now here, let's try to apply radius around the box model shadow. Here in our hover effect, add the property name box-shadow, followed by its value. First is the horizontal shadow. Next is the vertical shadow, the blur effect, and the color of your shadow. Now, let's add the fourth value, which is our radius. So we can adjust the radius around your box model. For example, 15px. Now for the fourth and the last box shadow styling, we have the multiple shadow. First, let's type the value for the first layer of your shadow, followed by the value for the second layer of your shadow. For you to be able to see the radius of your second layer of the shadow, you have to adjust or change the value of the radius. For example, from 15px from the first layer, let's change it to 25px. And then you can set what is the color of your second layer of the shadow. What is CSS 2D transform? This property allows you to move, rotate, scale, and skew the elements in your website. We can apply this styling to different elements in your website, such as box model, text, picture, buttons, etc. There are 5 CSS to the transform methods. First, translate. Second, rotate. Third, scale. And lastly, we have skew. Set styling for duty transform syntax, we have the property name transform. And for the value, we can set it to 4 different methods. We have translate, rotate, scale, and skew. First method is translate. Translate method moves an element from its current position. It is according to the parameters given for the x-axis and the y-axis. Let's start first for the value of the x-axis. If the value is positive, it will move to the right. And if you set the value to negative, it will move to the left side. So we have here for box model. Let's try to style with the value of translate. So here, in our hover effect, kindly type the property transform, and then type the value translate. Inside of the open and close parentheses, let's try to set the number with a positive number. And as you can see, as we set 10px positive number, the element is moving to its right side. And as we set the value to negative number, the element is moving to its left side. Now we are here in the y-axis. If the value is set to positive, the element will move to the bottom. And if the value is set to negative number, the element will move at the top. Now, let's set the value for the y-axis. Let's start first the positive number. For example, 10px. And as we hover the mouse over the box model, it is moving on the bottom part. And if we set the value to negative, the box model or the element is moving to the top. Second method is rotate. The rotate method rotates an element clockwise or counterclockwise according to a given degree. If we set the value to positive, the element will move clockwise. So let's try this one. Set the value of the property transform to a rotate value. First, type transform property, next the value rotate, and then open and close parentheses. Inside of the open and close parentheses, you have to declare a degree. For example, let's try 5-degree positive value. As we declare a positive value, the element is rotating clockwise. And if we set the value to negative, the element will move counterclockwise. Third method is scale. The scale method increases the size of an element. For the value of the scale, the value can take up with decimal number. For example, let's set the value to number 1.05. And if you change the value of the decimal, the element will increase its size. The fourth and the last 2D transform method is skew. The skew method skews an element by the given angle. Now, if we set the value to a positive number, the element will move to the right side. So let's try this one. First, type the property transform and type the value skew. Inside of the open and close parentheses, kindly put a value. For example, positive 5 degree. And if we set the value to negative, the element will move to the left side.